I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob, and an uneasy feeling crept over me. It was well past midnight, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Yet, there it was again, the persistent knocking that had roused me from my sleep, heart pounding. I tiptoed to the peephole and peered through. Two figures stood on my doorstep, obscured by the shadows of the porch. Their faces were hidden behind grotesque masks, contorted into twisted expressions that sent shivers down my spine. I froze, my mind racing with fear and confusion. Who were these masked intruders, and what did they want from me? As if sensing my hesitation, the knocking grew louder, more insistent. Each thud reverberated through the silent house, echoing the pounding of my own heart. Summoning every ounce of courage, I took a deep breath and reached for the phone, fingers trembling as I dialed 911. But before I could utter a single word, a chilling realization washed over me. The landline was dead. Panic surged through me, rendering me paralyzed as I stared at the lifeless phone in my hand. Trapped in a nightmare, with no means of calling for help, I was at the mercy of those ominous figures outside. Forcing myself to focus, I scanned the room for any possible escape route, but the windows were sealed shut, and the doors reinforced with sturdy locks. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Desperation clawed at my chest as I heard the sound of splintering wood, the unmistakable sound of the door being forced open. With a strangled cry, I bolted towards the stairs, racing to barricade myself in the safety of my bedroom. But before I could reach sanctuary, they were upon me, two towering silhouettes, looming ominously in the darkness. Their masked faces leered at me, eyes gleaming with malice as they closed in, trapping me in a corner. With nowhere left to turn, I braced myself for the inevitable. But instead of violence, they spoke words dripping with menace, promising unspeakable horrors if I dared to defy them. I nodded, my throat constricted with fear as I watched them ransack my home, tearing through drawers and cabinets with ruthless efficiency. They were searching for something, though I dared not guess what. Minutes stretched into eternity as they prowled the house, their every movement a sinister dance of shadows and whispers. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone, leaving behind nothing but shattered remnants of my shattered sense of security. Alone once more, I sank to the floor, trembling in the aftermath of the ordeal. The night stretched on, an endless expanse of darkness haunted by the memory of those masked intruders. And as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I knew that I would never forget the terror of that fateful night, a night when the monsters came knocking, and I was powerless to stop them.
The house felt unusually still as I sat alone in the living room, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. It was a typical Friday night, and my roommates were out of town, leaving me to enjoy the peace and quiet of our cozy suburban home. As I flipped through social media feeds, a strange sensation washed over me, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I glanced around the room, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Shrugging off the unease, I returned my attention to my phone, determined to distract myself from the unsettling sensation. But then I heard it, a soft, muffled sound coming from upstairs. It was faint at first, like the distant echo of footsteps on old floorboards. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to listen. There it was again, a rhythmic tapping, like someone gently rapping their knuckles against a door. But all of my roommates were gone for the weekend. Who could possibly be upstairs? With trembling hands, I reached for my phone, ready to call the police at the first sign of danger. But before I could dial, the tapping stopped abruptly, leaving behind an eerie silence that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. I debated whether to investigate, my rational mind telling me it was just the house settling or a trick of the wind. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Gathering my courage, I tiptoed towards the staircase, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet with each cautious step. As I reached the top of the stairs, I felt a chill run down my spine. The hallway stretched out before me, dimly lit by the glow of the moon filtering in through the windows. And that's when I saw it, a faint outline of a figure standing at the end of the hallway, their form obscured by the darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the apparition, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. It was like something out of a horror movie, a ghostly presence lingering in the shadows, its eyes fixed on me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I wanted to scream, to run far away from this haunted house and never look back. But something held me in place, rooted to the spot as if by some unseen force, and then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the ghost spoke. "Help me," it pleaded, its voice echoing through the empty hallway. I felt a surge of compassion wash over me, overriding my fear as I took a tentative step forward. "What do you need?" I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. But before the ghost could respond, a sudden gust of wind swept through the hallway, extinguishing the flickering candle on the nearby table. And just like that, the apparition was gone, leaving behind nothing but a lingering sense of dread. I stood alone in the darkness, the echoes of the ghost's plea still ringing in my ears, and as I turned to retreat back downstairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in the house, that something sinister was lurking just beyond the shadows, waiting to reveal itself when the time was right.
The house was eerily quiet as I sat alone, the glow of my laptop casting long shadows across the room. It was well past midnight, and the only sounds were the occasional creaks of the old floorboards and the hum of distant traffic. I had just finished watching a scary movie, and despite my attempts to shake off the unease, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic knocking at the door. My heart skipped a beat as I glanced nervously towards the front entrance. Who could be knocking at this hour? I checked my phone, but there were no missed calls or messages. With a shaky hand, I reached for the door handle, my mind racing with thoughts of intruders and ghostly apparitions. As I cautiously opened the door, a gust of cold wind swept into the house, sending a shiver down my spine. Standing on the porch was a figure cloaked in darkness, their features obscured by the shadows. "Hello," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. There was no response, just the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. I took a step forward, squinting to get a better look at the mysterious visitor. And then, without warning, they spoke, a voice that sent chills down my spine. "May I come in?" they asked, their tone unsettlingly calm. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to slam the door shut and lock it tight. But something about the stranger's presence held me in place, rooted to the spot, as if by some unseen force. "Why?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. "I seek shelter from the storm," they replied cryptically. I glanced up at the sky, but there wasn't a cloud in sight. The night was clear and starry, the moon casting an ethereal glow over the landscape. "Please," the figure insisted, taking a step closer. "I mean you no harm." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside, allowing them to enter. As they crossed the threshold, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the candles on the mantelpiece, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for the light switch, my hands trembling as I tried to regain control of my racing thoughts. When the lights flickered back on, the stranger was gone, leaving behind nothing but a trail of muddy footprints leading towards the staircase. I stood frozen in place, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Had it all been a hallucination, a trick of the mind brought on by fatigue and fear? But then I heard it again, a soft, rhythmic knocking at the door. Only this time, it was coming from inside the house.